Media Melanie Talks TV. I'm Melanie, and today I am back to talk about Bad Sisters Season 2, Episode 4 on Apple TV+. This dark comedy just keeps on giving, and in this episode, which is very Becca-centric, convinced that a blackmailer is to blame for their tragedy, the sisters look for evidence, and Becca is shaken by life-changing news. But before we get into the Becca of it all, I just want to shout out that for a show that is focused on a group of sisters, I appreciate the infusion of attractive men this season. We've got Daryl McCormick back as Matt Claflin, and between his eyes, his accent, the fact that he is in a band, what a pleasure to watch. Then we add in a side of Ian. There are no complaints from me on the men we get to see in Bad Sisters. So shout out to you guys. Okay, so this episode again focuses a lot on Becca. We have Houlihan, who is out there like an absolute dog with a bone, who does not seem like she will rest until she ends up catching Becca or the Garvey sisters in this whole scheme of being involved in JP's death. Becca has denied her involvement with Matt, but of course that catches up to her when Houlihan follows her to Matt's band's performance. And I mean, the cat's kind of out of the bag, because why else would she be there? Houlihan flashing her badge as she did to get that woman to move away from the bar, also just kind of ridiculous. But it's all going back to this focus on Becca and the sisters, and potentially what could blow back on them in terms of their involvement in covering up JP's death for Grace and for Roger. We learn that Becca is pregnant, she breaks up with Joe, she goes back to Matt's house, she breaks into Angelica's house and ends up getting caught. So there was actually a lot of action in this episode, so let's dive into it all. I enjoyed that scene early in the episode when the Garveys confront Angelica on the beach. Becca calls her a stage 5 clinger, which could not be more spot on for this woman who they call the wagon, who has been a thorn in everybody's side, who I don't believe was even close with Grace in the first place, and who is probably going to end up being the body in the trunk at the end of the season that we saw back in that first episode. Angelica's got some good zingers. She accuses Ursula of being back on the drugs again, and then notes that, oh, all of this rubbish that turns up on the beach. She is hurling insults at the Garvey sisters as they're essentially accusing her of blackmailing their sister Grace. Meanwhile, Angelica is saying that shame drove Grace to her death, but the Garveys do not believe that. They, of course, believe that the blackmail by Angelica had something to do with the tragic loss of their sister. So the Garveys decide a good course of action would be to break into Angelica's house, which turns out really not the best idea, and I'm just gonna say it. Breaking and entering is never a good solution, pretty much ever. And wearing black in the middle of the day does indeed draw more attention to yourself than if you just wore regular clothes and were walking through the neighborhood. So I do think they could have maybe planned a little bit better for this. This sauna scene where they are planning the break-in, I do feel like that is quite a metaphor for the actual heat that they are going to be taking while they're focused on by the Garda in this investigation. So they're feeling the heat quite literally, but also figuratively, because Becca ends up as a person of interest in this investigation towards the end of this episode. So the sauna was an interesting setting for them to be discussing this and making this plan, which of course does end up getting foiled. So the fact that Becca literally ends up in the interrogation room under the heat after making the plan in the sauna was really a full circle moment in this episode. Also, the second BB and Becca said, oh, don't worry, we have this, we got this. In my mind, I'm like, oh, they so do not have this. So that was definitely a bit of foreshadowing for the fact that this plan was ill-formed. They did not think it through enough. And of course, this pregnancy that we learn about is what derails Becca, ends up with her caught in Angelica's bathroom vomiting, which causes her to run out, trample over her, and then of course Angelica ends up calling the police. But also, can we talk about Ursula and her failure to be a lookout? Her whole job was keeping an eye on Roger and Angelica at church to make sure they didn't come back. It is understandable that, of course, she got the phone call that Molly, her daughter, was in this altercation at Blanad's match earlier in the day. So that obviously causes her to leave and go over there, which causes Angelica to go home without anybody warning Becca and Bibi that she was on her way there. And another interesting thing we learned during the break-in was that Angelica actually had a husband before. I cannot imagine who on earth would marry this woman. And honestly, I wonder if she ended up killing him. I don't know. Could be. She seems like a terrible person to live with and also does not like it when people don't like her. So maybe Angelica is also a murderer. Who knows? But one thing that she is also not doing well is being a pet parent. Seeing that poor bunny in the closet all by its lonesome with the doors closed, could you be any worse? Animals, and bunnies in particular, are not meant to just be closed off like that. In fact, there are many people who own free-range bunnies. My family used to take care of this adorable rabbit called Bun Bun, who would just hop around our house with the dogs, being happy. It was litter box trained. So I did not enjoy seeing this poor rabbit locked inside of the closet by itself. Not cool, Angelica, not cool. We do see quite a bit of drama unfolding at Blanad's match. We see Eva head over there, and she sees Angelica giving Blanad a new helmet. And then, of course, we learn that Angelica's got this whole room set up in her house, and the Garveys accuse her of grooming their niece. And what is she doing, and why is she doing this? Was she just obsessed with Grace and wants to be this replacement mother figure for her daughter? I think it is so bizarre, and the fact that she had her jacket in there, we know Blah had also showed up at Angelica's house at the end of the last episode. What is the end game for these two, and why are they involved in this strange relationship? In that scene, I did think it was funny how Eva called Ursula Nurse Jackie, of course commenting on her pill problem, because Molly, her daughter, did end up getting her teeth hurt in this altercation that was ultimately caused by Blanad being this fierce beast on the field. And eventually in this episode, when the Garveys do confront Angelica, they appeal to her religious side and they ask her to drop these charges against Becca, saying that's what Jesus would do. And they come to this very strange agreement where Angelica can actually help them scatter Grace's ashes. What a bizarre request. Why does she even want to be involved with the Garveys? She comes across as so desperate and indeed a stage 5 clinger. You know what? I might even call her a stage 10 clinger because this woman is just so desperate to be accepted, but at the same time is such an antagonist that nobody wants to accept her. It's this duality where I've got to think Angelica is the one in the trunk that we're going to find at the end of the season, right? So we know, obviously, that there is a light shining right on the Garveys in terms of JP's murder investigation. But as Loftus says, they really can't do anything about it without evidence. And as long as they continue to keep their mouths shut, there's really nothing the Garda can actually do. But given the Garveys decided to go ahead and break into Angelica's house, and Angelica called the police and was able to identify Becca Garvey, they of course come, they arrest Becca, they put her in the interrogation room, and she did not do herself any favors. Of course, they're still focusing on the her and Matt of it all. Becca is not giving any details about that, but she does give away a very important detail that Loftus and Houlihan were not aware of. They did not know about the money Grace had withdrawn and that she had in her possession on the night she died. Becca gives that away, and that, of course, is going to fuel more investigation. They're going to start looking into this, and why is there a blackmail happening? Who is involved with it? Things are starting to unravel more for the Garveys, and they did themselves a huge disservice planning this break-in, very poorly, might I add, because ultimately Becca got caught. Now, it wasn't necessarily her fault. Okay, yes, she is pregnant. She's been vomiting. We've seen all of the signs of pregnancy going on here. Eventually, she does get the pregnancy test and confirm she's pregnant. She doesn't let her boyfriend know. She does eventually let Eva know. But obviously, she's got some hormonal things happening right now. Her emotions are very large, and she's caught up in this rock and a hard place situation now where she's in this other relationship with someone who loves her very much, by the way, but she keeps thinking about Matt. Like she says, she doesn't have to explain herself to him. She feels this level of comfort with him. But I do wonder if that is a result of them sharing this secret. Is it only because of this connection and what Matt did for her? Or is there a genuine connection that is going to end up allowing them to be together in the long run? I don't know if it will be a sustainable relationship, because a big secret like that as the foundation of your relationship obviously does not start things out on the right foot. So I'm very curious to see where things go with Becca and Matt. But again, I've got to say, I am supportive of Becca and Matt being together because Daryl McCormick and Eve Hewson just make such a cute couple, and I love watching them together. Speaking of, again, the hot men, Ian has really become part of this crew. He is keeping the secret for the Garveys. Him and Eva seem to be getting closer, and I would not be surprised if they end up getting together by the end of the season. Again, at first I was kind of thinking, oh, it's in pretty poor taste, but obviously they are forming a connection over the shared loss of Grace. And I was watching Matt and Jess TV's reaction video to one of the prior episodes of Bad Sisters, and Jess used to be a funeral director and mentioned this sort of thing happens in grief all the time. So when you look at it from that perspective, I guess it is pretty normal, mourning over the same person, this shared loss. So I don't think it's maybe in as bad taste as I initially thought, but it is kind of weird being with your dead sister's widowed husband. So we'll see what happens with that. But Ian is in the inner circle, so much so that he goes and actually threatens Angelica at the end of the episode. And while that is a really cool guy move because he's trying to defend the sisters and really protect Grace and her legacy even in her death, we know now, of course, that Ian did not tell the Garda any of these secrets. He was not in fact murdered. He is very much alive. And the fact that he is willing to put himself out there and go threaten Angelica and just tell her to stop doing this says a lot about his character. But it also seems like it could be a big setup for him to be the one in the trunk at the end of the season. Because do you think Angelica is going to tolerate him being out there telling her not to do something? Absolutely not. And by the way, I just cannot stand anything about Angelica, and that goes to Fiona Shaw playing this role to a T. Watching Angelica put on this fake-ass neck brace, watching Roger waiting on her hand and foot, where, by the way, he does end up disclosing more information about the fact that JP had actually raped Eva. So that was information to Angelica. I don't know if that will make her more sympathetic towards the Garveys and actually stop and just walk away and say, okay, cool, I can scatter the ashes. I got what I wanted. Fine. No, I don't think so. We've got the whole Blah situation, her setting up this room, having her jacket. I think it is such a strange situation to be going after somebody else's teenage daughter to put them in your inner circle when you weren't even friends with her mom in the first place, and she's got a whole slew of aunts that she could be connecting with, although Blah clearly is very angry. And it also makes me go back to, is she somehow involved in this in a bigger way? I thought maybe she had been involved with killing Ian, but he of course was revealed to be alive. But I do think that there is something big that will happen with Blanad this season. I'm just not sure exactly what yet. Could it be possible that she is the one in the trunk and somehow her involvement with Angelica gets her accidentally killed? I can't picture the Garvey sisters wrapping up the body of their niece and dropping it over a cliff. I would think they would come up with some sort of other plan to defer the blame onto somebody else, such as Angelica. And back to the Becca and Matt of it all. When she shows up at his house at the end and wants to play Mario Kart and they kiss, and we had seen Joe following her, coming after her, realizing, putting two and two together that Becca's out there with this guy, Becca breaks up with him. And for Joe to be going after Matt's band, I am not a Joe fan. I did not like him at the beginning of this, but then I was a little more endeared to him watching the way that he treats Becca. He very clearly loves her, and their relationship obviously was not built on a big secret as her and Matt's is. But Becca can't deal with it. She asks for some time. Obviously, she's got something else going on because we find out that she is pregnant, and she does not tell Joe she is pregnant. She has not told Matt she is pregnant. She does end up telling Eva, but how is this pregnancy going to play into it? Let's say her and Matt do get back together. Is Matt going to want to raise the baby of her ex-boyfriend Joe, or will she reconcile with Joe and end up raising the baby? I'm not sure how any of this baby stuff is going to play out, but we do know there will be another Garvey on the way should everything proceed well with the pregnancy, and I would imagine we don't see any sort of baby reveal until at least season 3. Next week is episode 5, which is going to be halfway through the season. The season is flying by. Episode 5, which will stream on December 4th, is called Bloom. In a bid to stay out of trouble, the sisters take the next step in their plan with Angelica, just as a desperate Eva puts a target on their backs. A target? They already have targets on their backs. What could be a bigger target? After this break-in and the police know, obviously, the Garveys are up to something, what could be a bigger target? I am dying to find out. How are you feeling so far about the sophomore season of Bad Sisters? Are you enjoying it? The biggest question remains, who is the body in the trunk? And again, if I'm revealing who I think it is, it's got to be either Angelica, it could be Ian, maybe Blanad, or maybe it's Roger. Roger does have enough screen time this season where it would make sense, but then they'd have the wagon coming after them because very clearly Angelica would know that the Garveys were somehow behind all of this, which could cause a cliffhanger and propel us into season 3 with another mystery at hand and the Garveys still being investigated. But with shows like Murder in the Building, I think to myself, how many more murders can there actually be in one building? I feel that way about Bad Sisters. I mean, how many actual murders can the Garveys be involved in? This was meant as a limited series. It was only supposed to have one season, and it very much told a complete story. So when Sharon Horgan found out she got another season, of course she had to come up with more storyline. And I'm not sure how sustainable that will be for more seasons after this. And I'm interested to see how it concludes. Will we get another cliffhanger? Or will season 2 be the end? Because seriously, how many more murders can the Garveys be involved with before they all end up in jail or dead, as we've seen with Grace this season? They were not afraid to kill off one of the main characters in Garvey Sisters, and I don't know, potentially could some backlash hit one of them and we lose another Garvey sister this season or potentially early next season? Only time will tell. Of course, I'll be back next week to cover the next episode of Bad Sisters, so make sure you are subscribed, drop a comment, let me know what you're thinking about this season so far. And if you skew dark with your watches, you've already got Apple TV+, so do not sleep on Silo. It is a dystopian drama, and it's actually a show that really got me interested in sci-fi back when I watched season 1. So even if sci-fi is not necessarily your thing, give season 1 a try. If you're already watching season 2, make sure that you're checking out my Silo coverage here on the channel at MediaMelanieTV.com. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more great television coming over the next couple of months. I am so here to cover it. Dexter Original Sin, Looking at You, Severance, another dark show on Apple TV Plus is coming in January, and I could not be more excited to cover that as well. So, thank you so much for watching. I hope everybody has a very happy Thanksgiving. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Give me a like if you want to share and comment. Really appreciate that as well. So, see you next week. Media Melanie, clicking off.